Hello, genealogists. This is Craig, and this is Just Genealogy. And today I had another happy day. And let me explain to you why I had a happy day. And as you know, for me to have a happy day, there have to be books involved one way or the other. So I have books to talk to you about. Now, I've always had an interest in Charleston during the American Revolution, largely because my Quaker 1st Virginia Regiment guy disappears, then he shows up, disappears, then he shows up during the war. And I know that his unit was captured at Charleston, but I never knew whether he was captured at Charleston. And he didn't live long enough to get a pension where he could tell me. So I like to find things about Charleston. And one of the first books I ever found about Charleston was a book called Cecilia Garth, A Story of Charleston in the Revolution. And this is a book that Heritage Books sells. It is actually in short supply and will not be reprinted, largely because it was reprinted by Nautical and Aviation Press, and it was an arrangement with the estate. And you know how hard it is to find estates long after somebody dies, especially when the copyright is 1959. So I'll save a copy in my library, and if I ever come across the descendants of Gwen Bristow, who's the author of this book, and they want to reprint the book, I will jump for joy. Until then, I'll wait patiently. But she gives insight into what life in the city of Charleston is like before the Revolution, during the Revolution, while Americans had Charleston, and during the British occupation and afterwards. A very good book. And I think I have half a case left. So that means it'll probably disappear within the year, if not sooner. So a subscriber gave me information about the possibility of a book on Charleston during the war and the prisoners of war. And I've always had an interest in those because I've never found any records for them. So I went looking for that book, and in the process I found other books relating to Charleston. So my reading plate is going to be very full. I haven't read these books yet, but I don't wait to read a book to tell you about it, because if I did that, the book might go out of print. One never knows. There is this book called Patriots, Pistols, and Petticoats, and it is Poor Sinful Charlestown During the American Revolution. It's by Walter J. Frazier, and it's in its second edition, so it's had vetting. And it portrays the lively, at times bawdy atmosphere in Charleston during the Revolutionary War era. And this brawling port city, the fourth largest in Britain's North America, and the largest in the South at the time of the Revolutionary War, boasted commerce, politics, cultural events, and entertainment as sophisticated as any found in America. And this guy happens to be a retired professor of history and former chair of history department at Georgia Southern University. And he's author of Charleston, A History of a Southern City, done by University of South Carolina Press in 1990. So this won't be the first book I read, because I think I got a little insight into the city from Cecilia's book, which I've read parts of. But there are some good maps in here and some typical pictures of personages. So I'm glad to add it to our repertoire here at Heritage Books. And then one of the books that I was definitely looking for, or the author that I was definitely looking for, was a man by the name of Borick. And Borick writes, A Gallant Defense, The Siege of Charleston, 1780. And this book will probably be the first one that I do read. I have not encountered a book on the Battle of Charleston before, and I collect battle books from the Revolution. I have probably 20 of them. So I was very happy to find this one. And it will be, it's a University of South Carolina Press book. And I'm actually, this will be the first one that I read. Did I already say that? I probably did. But I'm looking forward to this. And again, another book added to Heritage Books. And then the book that I actually went looking for was relieve us of this burthen, American Prisoners of War in the Revolutionary South. And this will be the second book that I will read, because this is post-battle, and it has lots of footnotes, so it's my kind of book. Now, Borick is the assistant director of the Charleston Museum in Charleston, South Carolina. So he uses Revolutionary War pension by land warrant application files, which have been underutilized. So he's not going to actually be able to help me because my guy doesn't get a pension. He dies long before pensions were available. But it may give me insight into whether, in fact, my guy's unit was captured in Charleston, or whether whether the unit was outside of Charleston at the time of the battle. Now, there were a couple of more books that I got also in my search that I think we'll find interesting. And one is called Patriots in Exile, Charleston Rebels in St. Augustine During the American Revolution. And it's by James Waring McCready and C.L. Bragg. And I know James Waring McCready very well, although he does not know me. Or at least I know his family, because I used to polish brass in his house when I was a college student at Sewanee. And either this guy or his father was, probably more likely his father, was the chancellor of the university. And in perusing through this book, I learned that there's something called the Sewanee Trust for Historic Preservation, which I'm going to search out. I have searched out, and I'm probably going to join just because I'm from Sewanee as a student. And he's past president of the Franklin County Historical Association. And I used to work as a kid in my college days in Franklin County around the mountain. And it's full of footnotes, and it has names, and it has little tiny bios and those kind of things, that vignettes that deal with these folks who got out of Charleston and headed south. So I'm looking forward to reading it. And just because I came across it, and I've seen books on Utah Springs before. We have published one ourselves, but here's another book on Utah Springs. When the eclipse of the sun, a few years back, maybe 3, maybe 4, I don't remember exactly when it was, I went down to Santee, because that was right in the course of the eclipse. So the maximum eclipse was over Santee, South Carolina. And mistakenly, I decided to head east instead of heading west when everybody started heading home. And what normally would probably be a 4 or 5 hour trip maybe, turned out to be a 9-hour trip to get back home. But in the process of doing that, I drove by the reservoir, which used to be where the Battle of Utah Springs was. So there's a park there, which of course wasn't open, but I want to get back there to see. And there's lots of maps in here, lots of pictures of people in here. There's lots going on. And so I'm really looking forward to being able to read this book, because my ancestor, William E. Brockett, Major of South Carolina Troops, was at the Battle of Utah Springs. So I've been able to bring together a whole bunch of books that relate to Charleston during the Revolution. I'm looking forward to reading many of them, probably all of them by the time it's all said and done. And I've got them in stock here at Heritage Books. And because I've got them in stock, and I just can't stand talking to you about books without giving you a discount, the discount code will be Charles. And the discount will be 20% because they aren't my books. So, if you have an interest in Charleston during the Revolution, you'll be able to get any of these 6 titles, including the Utah Springs one, since it's South Carolina, and including, although it's almost out of print, the Cecilia Garth book. Because after all, if I can figure it out how to find that estate, I may be able to bring that book back in print as a paperback. Most of these are hardback, but not all of them. I have 3 hardbacks, 3 paperbacks. So, this has been Craig, this has been Just Genealogy, and this has been Charleston in the Revolutionary War. And books about it. Not actually about the battle itself, but just books about the battle. Don't you care more about books than you do the battles? Actually, I care a lot about the battles. You all have a good day. We're moving right along. We're almost to 500 subscribers. Tell your friends. I appreciate your subscribing. I love doing this. I just wish I could catch up so that I, create that bolus of things so I can relax a little bit. Doesn't look like that's going to happen anytime soon. So, again, Craig, Just Genealogy. If you're not having fun with genealogy, you're doing it wrong.